Okay, so we are going to start our next unit. This is going to be unit 4. And we are going to start by looking at just some reviewing factoring. So this is unit 4, and we're going to be factoring today. So we're going to be factoring two ways. One is greatest common factor, and the other is factoring by grouping. So greatest common factor is always your first step. So when factoring, always look for the greatest common factor first. So that's your first thing to do. So if I want to review some GCFs, this is just a review for you. So greatest common factor review, let's look at, I don't know, 10x and 6xy. So I'm going to think about what are all of my factors of 10. So for 10x, we have 2, 5, and x. Those are my factors of 10x. So let's look at 6x. The factors of 6x are 2, 3, 1, 6, x, and y. Oop, I forgot 1 and 10 up here, didn't I? All right, so I'm looking for the largest factor for each of these. So it looks like I have 1 and 2, but my largest one is 2, right? And then what else do they have in common as far as letters? It's just an x. So my greatest common factor is 2x, right? So if I had this as an expression like 10x plus 6xy, factored would be pulling out the 2x, so that's factoring out the 2x, like dividing. So if I'm dividing out a 2x from a 10x, I get a 5, right? And if I'm dividing a 2x from a 6xy, we get a 3y, all right? So that's factoring that greatest common factor. Let's do another one. That was 1. Here's number 2. So let's say that I have 8x to the 4th and 56x to the 2nd. So let's list all of our factors of 8x to the 4th. So it's 1, 2, 4, 8, and 4 x's, right? And then my 56x to the 2nd is going to be 1, 2, holy cow. Does 3 go into 56? No. Does 4? I think so. Yeah. 5 doesn't, 6 doesn't, 7 does, 8 does. How many times does 4 go in? 14. And then 2 goes in 28, and 1 in 56. And then you have 2 x's. All right, so I'm going to look at my numbers first. What's the largest number that goes into both 8 and 56? That would be 8. And so for my x's, I want to see how many what's the most amount that we have in common, right? They both have 1 and they both have 2. So my GCF here is 8 and then 2 x's. So my greatest common factor is 8x squared. So if we were to factor 8x to the 4th plus 56x squared, then I would factor out the 8x squared. And then on the inside of the parentheses, it's like I'm dividing. So if I take 8x to the 4th and I divide 8x squared out, then I would have 1x squared left, right? If I take 56x squared and divide 8x squared, we get just 7. So way to check yourself is to distribute that 8x squared back out and see if you get the beginning value, which we should. We would get 8x to the 4th plus 56x squared. All right, let's do a couple on your own, and then we can review these in class. So let's try this one. 3y cubed plus 4, 3, 5y. All right, here's another one. Try this one. Negative 16a squared b to the fourth. This one's kind of tricky because it has 2 minus 6 a cubed b cubed. All right, so those are the ones that you're trying. I'm going to show you a different way, as in factor by grouping. So here's our second way, is factor by grouping. So let's say that you have a polynomial of 4. So I have 4 of them. Let's say it's 4x to the fourth minus 2x to the third minus 6x plus 3. Now, if I look at all 4 of these, there's not a greatest common factor between all of them, right? So like if I looked at these 2, they do, well, really all 3 of these have a 2 in common, but the 3 is kind of on its own. But if I look at my x's, like, okay, these 3 have an x, but this one doesn't. This is a good opportunity for me to factor by grouping. So my steps in factor by grouping is to group the first 2 terms and group the last 2 terms, and then find the GCF and then put it together. So let's try this, and we'll have some more steps in just a little bit. Steps, if you can see that. So I'm going to group my first 2 terms and group my last 2 terms like this. And I'm going to look at my first 2 terms and decide, do they have a greatest common factor? Well, let's look at my numbers. What's the greatest common factor between 4 and 2? Well, it's 2. So I'm going to pull out a 2. What's my greatest common factor between x to the fourth and x to the third? It's x to the third. So like I'm dividing out that 2x cubed, I have a 2x left, and here I have a negative 1, because 2x cubed divided by 2x cubed is just 1. All right, let's look at my next 2 terms. Now, here's the trick. If there is a negative here, you're always going to pull that negative out. So I have a 6x and a 3. If I pull out a 3 here, because they both have a 3, that's my greatest common factor is 3. Then I have a 2x left, and if I pull out a 3, I'm going to change that sign, and a 1. All right. Wow. Notice what we have here. These are considered like terms, right? Because they are the same. So if these are the same, I'm going to say if like terms, combine the coefficients. So that means that these are like terms. So I'm going to combine the ones in the front. So I'm going to write it like this: 2x cubed minus 3. And what happens when you combine? Like if I had, I'll write it up here. If I had 6x plus 3x, we don't have 2x squared, or we don't have an x squared here or anything like that, but we have 9x. See how I'm just writing the x one time? Same thing down here. I'm combining my coefficients, and I'm writing this term one time. So this is how you factor by grouping. We're going to do some more of these in class. So when you come back, make sure you have 3 and 4 done already. And I'll see you soon.